Eddie Santos had been cleaning the orbital research station Delta 7 for 3 years. And in that time, he'd learned 2 important things. Aliens made just as much of a mess as humans, and most problems had simple solutions if you knew where to. "Look, morning, Eddie," called Dr. Vera Crystalline, the station's Andromedian administrator, as he wheeled his cleaning cart past the main laboratory. Her crystalline features flickered with what Eddie had learned indicated mild stress in her. "Species. Morning, Doc. Rough night in the lab again?" Eddie nodded toward the scorch marks on the laboratory walls and the smell of burned electronics that even the station's air recyclers couldn't quite eliminate. The quantum resonance calibrator malfunctioned again during the midnight shift. 3rd time this month. Our engineering team says the resonance patterns are becoming increasingly unstable, but they cannot determine the cause. Eddie paused in his cart pushing to look through the laboratory's transparent walls. Inside, a team of 6 different alien species huddled around a machine that looked like a cross between a pipe organ and a disco ball, all of them gesturing in their species equivalent of frustrated confusion. What's that thing supposed to do, anyway? The calibrator maintains harmonic resonance across all our research equipment. Without it, our experiments become dangerously unstable. We've had to shut down 17 different research projects because we cannot maintain consistent calibration. Eddie had seen a lot of broken equipment in his 3 years on the station. Usually it came down to something simple, a loose connection, a clogged filter, something that wasn't quite sitting right. But the aliens always seemed to look for complicated explanations first. "Mind if I take a look?" "I'm not gonna touch anything. Just curious." Dr. Crystalline's expression shifted to what Eddie recognized as polite confusion. "Mr. Santos, I appreciate your interest, but this is a quantum resonance calibrator. It requires advanced degrees in theoretical physics and xenotechnological engineering to understand its operational parameters." "Doc, I've been cleaning around broken machines for 20 years. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes helps." After a moment's hesitation, Dr. Crystalline led him into the laboratory. The 6-member engineering team looked up from their diagnostic, readings with expressions ranging from curiosity to mild annoyance. "This is Eddie Santos, our maintenance technician," Dr. Crystalline announced. "He has requested to observe the calibrator malfunction." Eddie approached the machine, noting the subtle vibrations in the floor that the aliens seemed to be ignoring. The slight rattling sound that wasn't quite in sync with the machine's operational hum, and the faint smell of ozone that suggested an electrical connection wasn't quite right. "How long has it been making that rattling noise?" Eddie asked. The lead engineer, a tall Arctuvian with blue-scaled skin, consulted his diagnostic tablet. "Rattling noise? Our acoustic analyzers detect no abnormal auditory emissions. It's real subtle. Like something's come a little loose inside." Eddie walked around the machine, listening. "And you smell that? Kind of like right before a thunderstorm?" "Mr. Santos," interrupted Dr. Lyrics, the team Centauri physicist, "we have conducted comprehensive diagnostics on all electronic components. All connections are within operational parameters." Eddie nodded politely. He'd learned that arguing with the science team wasn't productive. But he'd also learned that sometimes the most sophisticated diagnostic equipment missed the obvious problems. "When did these malfunctions start happening?" 3 weeks ago, Dr. Crystalline replied. "The problems began after we installed the new gravitational field generators on Deck 7, right below this laboratory." "Yes, but the gravitational field generators operate on completely different principles than the resonance calibrator. Our engineers have confirmed there are no interaction effects." Eddie looked at the floor, thinking about the subtle vibrations he'd felt. In his experience, when new equipment got installed and old equipment started acting up, it usually meant the new stuff was affecting the old stuff in ways that weren't obvious from the manuals. "Doc, Would it be okay if I took a look at the area right below this lab? Just to check on some basics, power connections, structural mounts, that kind of thing? The engineering team exchanged glances that Eddie interpreted as scientific professionals, tolerating the curiosity of a maintenance worker. Mr. Santos, I appreciate your thoroughness, but the installation of the gravitational field generators was performed to exact specifications by certified xenotechnological engineers. I'm sure it was, Doc, but sometimes when you install something new, it affects things in ways nobody expected. Won't take me long to check. An hour later, Eddie was crawling through the maintenance spaces below the laboratory with his flashlight and basic toolkit, looking for anything that seemed out of place. The gravitational field generators hummed with smooth efficiency, their installation clean and professional, exactly as the engineers had said, but the power conduits that fed the laboratory above showed signs of stress that Eddie recognized from 20 years of maintenance work. The conduits themselves were rated for the power load, but they were vibrating at a frequency that suggested resonance effects from the gravitational field generators below. More importantly, the vibration had loosened one of the mounting brackets that secured the power conduits to the station's hull. The bracket wasn't completely loose. It would take sophisticated testing to detect the fault, but it was loose enough to create intermittent connection problems when the gravitational field generators cycled through their operational patterns. Eddie tightened the mounting bracket with a simple wrench, checked two similar brackets that showed early signs of the same problem, and headed back to the laboratory. Find anything interesting in your exploration, Mr. Santos? Dr. Crystalline asked as Eddie emerged from the maintenance hatch. Maybe. Could someone run a test on the calibrator? I want to see if anything's changed. The engineering team exchanged glances again, but Dr. Lyrics activated the calibrator's diagnostic sequence. For the first time in 3 weeks, the machine ran through its complete calibration cycle without errors, maintaining perfect harmonic resonance across all parameters. Laboratory fell silent. That is ... unexpected, Dr. Crystalline said slowly. What did you do? Tightened a loose bracket. The vibration from the new gravitational field generators was affecting the power supply to the calibrator. Not enough to show up on your diagnostic tests, but enough to cause intermittent resonance problems. The 6-member engineering team stared at Eddie with expressions he couldn't quite interpret. Mr. Santos, Dr. Lyrics said carefully, are you saying you resolved a 3-week quantum resonance malfunction by tightening a bracket? Well, yeah. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. By the next morning, news of Eddie's bracket fix had spread throughout the research station. As he made his rounds, Eddie noticed aliens stopping their conversations to watch him work, and he overheard discussions in languages he didn't understand, but recognized the tone of scientific puzzlement. Eddie called Commander Rex Nightsong, the station's vegan security chief, as Eddie cleaned the mess hall. Dr. Crystalline wants to see you in the main laboratory. Eddie finished wiping down the table he was working on and followed Commander Nightsong to the lab, where he found Dr. Crystalline with an assembled group of the station's senior research staff. Mr. Santos, Dr. Crystalline began, we have been discussing yesterday's calibrator repair. Our engineering team has confirmed that your diagnostic assessment was correct, and that the solution you implemented has completely resolved the malfunction. Glad. It worked, Doc. However, we are puzzled by your diagnostic methodology. You identified a problem that our most advanced sensors failed to detect, using what appeared to be basic sensory observation. Eddie looked around the assembled scientists, noting expressions of curiosity, mixed with what he was learning to recognize as intellectual confusion in various alien species. Doc, I've been fixing things for 20 years. You develop a feel for when something's not quite right. Dr. Corvin Steelclaw, the station's senior engineer, stepped forward. His draconic features conveyed What Eddie had learned indicated serious scientific interest in his species. "Mr. Santos, we have analyzed your diagnostic process. You identified acoustic anomalies below the threshold of our instruments, detected olfactory indicators of electrical stress that our sensors missed, and correctly hypothesized mechanical stress effects that our structural analysis did not predict. This suggests either remarkable intuitive ability or what? Or a diagnostic methodology that we do not understand." Eddie wasn't sure how to respond to that. "I just know what things sound like when they're working right, and what they sound like when they're not." "But how do you know this?" pressed Dr. Zara Brightflame, the station's theoretical physicist. "What training did you receive in quantum resonance diagnostics?" "None. I fix air conditioners, plumbing, electrical systems. Same principles apply to most machinery. Something's loose, something's clogged, something's not getting enough power, or something's getting too hot." The scientists exchanged glances. In what Eddie was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of "Did he just say what I think he said?" "Mr. Santos," Dr. Crystalline said carefully, "are you suggesting that quantum resonance calibrators operate according to the same principles as air conditioning systems?" "Well, not exactly the same. But most mechanical problems come down to the same basic issues. Something that should be tight is loose. Something that should be clean is dirty. Something that should be cool is hot, or something that should have power doesn't." Dr. Steelclaw consulted his tablet. "Mr. Santos, we have 17 other research projects that have been shut down due to equipment malfunctions that our engineering teams have been unable to resolve. Would you be willing to examine these systems?" Eddie looked around the assembled scientists, realizing that his simple bracket tightening had somehow become the subject of serious scientific discussion. "Sure, Doc. I mean, I can't promise I'll be able to help, but I can take a look." "Excellent. We will arrange for you to examine the malfunctioning systems, beginning with the atmospheric composition analyzer that has been producing inconsistent readings for 6 weeks. 2 hours later, Eddie found himself in Laboratory C, looking at a machine that resembled a metallic tree with branches that pulsed with multicolored lights. Dr. Nova Plasmacore, the station's atmospheric specialist, explained the problem while a team of 3 engineers watched with expressions of scientific skepticism. "The analyzer should provide consistent atmospheric readings across all measurement parameters," Dr. Plasmacore explained. "However, readings fluctuate randomly, making reliable atmospheric analysis impossible." Eddie walked around the machine, listening to its operational sounds and observing the pattern of the pulsing lights. After a few minutes, he noticed that the fluctuations seemed to follow a subtle rhythm. "How often do you clean the intake filters?" "The intake filters are self-cleaning," replied Dr. Nexus, the lead engineer. "They require no maintenance." "That's what the manual says, but filters are filters. Even self-cleaning ones can get clogged if the dirt builds up faster than the cleaning cycle can handle." Eddie located the intake filters, which were indeed self-cleaning, but had accumulated a fine layer of particles that the automated cleaning system wasn't designed to handle. Particles from the station's construction work that had been going on for the past 6 weeks. 20 minutes later, Eddie had cleaned the filters manually. The atmospheric composition analyzer immediately began producing consistent, accurate readings. The atmospheric particulates from ongoing construction work exceeded the self-cleaning parameters. Eddie explained to the stunned engineering team. The filters were clean enough to pass their automated diagnostics, but not clean enough for precise atmospheric analysis. Double quotes. Dr. Plasmacore stared at her now functioning equipment. "Mr. Santos, our engineering diagnostics showed the filters were operating within acceptable parameters." Sometimes acceptable isn't the same as optimal. Construction dust is fine, enough that it doesn't trigger your clog detectors, but it still affects airflow. By the end of the day, Eddie had fixed 3 more sophisticated malfunctions. Loose connection in the gravitational wave detector, making it sensitive to vibrations from foot traffic. A clogged coolant line in the particle accelerator, causing inconsistent beam focus. And a misaligned sensor array, affected by thermal expansion from the station's day-night cycle. Each repair took less than an hour and used basic maintenance techniques that Eddie had learned over 20 years of keeping things running. Word of Eddie's unconventional diagnostic successes had reached the Galactic Research Council by the end of the week. Dr. Crystalline called him to her office on Friday morning with news that Eddie wasn't sure how to interpret. Mr. Santos, I have received a communication from the Galactic Research Council. They have requested a consultation regarding your diagnostic methodology. Eddie sat in the chair across from Dr. Crystalline's desk, which had been specially adjusted for human proportions. What kind of consultation? The Council oversees research stations throughout this sector of the galaxy. They have 17 stations reporting equipment malfunctions similar to those you have resolved here. Traditional diagnostic approaches have failed to identify solutions. And they think I might be able to help? They are intrigued by your success rate. In 4 days, you have resolved 12 equipment malfunctions that our best engineers could not diagnose. They wish to understand how this is possible. Eddie looked out the office window at the stars beyond, thinking about the implications of what Dr. Crystalline was saying. Doc, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a guy who knows how to fix things. That may be precisely why your diagnostic approach succeeds where our scientific methods fail. The following Monday, Eddie found himself in the station's main conference room with representatives from the Galactic Research Council participating via holographic projection. The council members represented 5 different species, all of whom regarded Eddie with expressions of polite scientific curiosity. Mr. Santos, began Council Administrator Arcturus Deep Current, whose aquatic features rippled with what Eddie had learned indicated formal academic interest. We have reviewed reports of your diagnostic successes. We wish to understand your methodology. I don't really have a methodology. I just look at what's broken and try to figure out why. But your success rate suggests a systematic approach that our engineers are not utilizing. Can you explain your diagnostic process? Eddie thought about how to explain 20 years of maintenance experience to a panel of galactic scientists. Well, I start with the obvious stuff. Is it plugged in? Is it clean? Is anything loose? Is it getting too hot or too cold? Most of the time, the problem is something simple that got overlooked. Council member Lyra Starweaver, whose crystalline form pulsed with analytical energy, consulted her data tablet. Mr. Santos, our engineering teams routinely check all basic operational parameters. Your diagnostic approach appears to identify problems that standard analysis does not detect. Maybe because I'm not looking for complicated problems. I'm looking for simple problems that might be hard to see. Can you provide an example? Eddie thought about the bracket repair that had started all this attention. Like the first thing I fixed, the quantum calibrator. Your diagnostic equipment was looking for quantum resonance problems because that's what the machine is supposed to do. But the actual problem was a loose bracket affecting the power supply. The quantum stuff was working fine. It just wasn't getting consistent power. The council members exchanged glances in what Eddie recognized as the alien equivalent of, we hadn't thought of that. Mr. Santos, said Council Member Corvin Ironscale, whose draconic features conveyed intense analytical focus, are you suggesting that our diagnostic protocols are inadequate? Not inadequate. Just ... Maybe too focused on the complicated stuff. Sometimes the problem is simple, but you don't see it because you're looking for something complex. Council Administrator Deep Current rippled with what Eddie interpreted as thoughtful consideration. Mr. Santos, Would you be willing to visit other research stations and demonstrate your diagnostic methodology? We have 17 stations with unresolved equipment malfunctions. Eddie looked around the conference room, realizing that his simple approach to fixing things had somehow become the subject of serious galactic scientific interest. Sure, I guess. But I should probably mention that I don't always know what I'm looking at. Your alien technology is pretty advanced compared to what I'm used to. Perhaps that is precisely why your approach succeeds, suggested Council Member Starweaver. You are not constrained by assumptions about how our technology should behave. Eddie's first stop was Research Station Gamma 12, which specialized in xenobotanical studies and had been struggling for 2 months with a plant growth accelerator that produced inconsistent results. The station's lead botanist, Dr. Sage Thornweaver, met Eddie at the docking bay with a mixture of hope and scientific skepticism. Mr. Santos, we appreciate the Council sending you, but I should mention that our growth accelerator represents the most advanced xenobotanical technology in this sector of the galaxy. Doc, I've never seen alien plants before, but I've helped my mom with her garden since I was 8. Plants have basic needs no matter where they come from. Dr. Thornweaver led Eddie to the botanical laboratory, where rows of alien plants in various stages of growth were tended by automated systems that monitored everything from soil composition to atmospheric humidity with scientific precision. A growth accelerator looked like a greenhouse crossed with a spaceship, containing environmental control systems that could simulate the atmospheric conditions of dozens of different worlds. According to Dr. Thornweaver, it had been producing inconsistent growth rates despite perfect environmental parameter control. Eddie walked through the accelerator, looking at the alien plants and noting that some appeared healthier than others, even though the environmental monitoring systems showed identical conditions throughout the facility. Doc, some of these plants look better than others. Are they supposed to be growing at different rates? No, that is the problem. All specimens should be receiving identical environmental conditions, but growth rates vary unpredictably. Eddie knelt down next to one of the healthier-looking plants, noting that its container was positioned near an air circulation vent. He moved to one of the less healthy plants and noticed it was positioned away from direct airflow. How much air circulation do these plants get? The atmospheric composition is maintained at optimal levels throughout the accelerator, right? But how much air movement? Like actual breeze. Dr. Thornweaver consulted her environmental data. Air circulation is maintained within acceptable parameters for atmospheric composition stability. Eddie had noticed that alien scientists often focused on complex measurements while missing simple observations. Doc, on Earth, most plants grow better with a little bit of breeze. Not just clean air, but actual air movement. Air movement? Our atmospheric systems maintain compositional stability. Excessive air movement would disrupt precise environmental control. But maybe the plants need a little disruption. Like, gentle air movement helps plants develop stronger stems and root systems. Dr. Thornweaver looked puzzled. Mr. Santos, are you suggesting that our environmental precision is counterproductive? Maybe. Plants in nature deal with wind, temperature changes, humidity fluctuations. If everything's too perfect, maybe they don't develop properly. With Dr. Thornweaver's permission, Eddie adjusted the air circulation systems to provide gentle, variable airflow throughout the growth accelerator, mimicking the natural air movement that plants would experience in outdoor environments. Within a week, plant growth rates throughout the accelerator had become consistent and had increased by an average of 23%. The plants were developing stronger root systems and more robust cellular structure than previous specimens grown under optimal conditions. Mr. Santos, Dr. Thornweaver reported, your modification has produced the most successful xenobotanical growth results in our station's history. How did you know that environmental variation would improve plant development? Plants need a little bit of stress to grow strong. Same principle applies whether you're growing tomatoes in Ohio or alien. Vegetables in space. Eddie's second stop was Research Station Beta 5, which conducted materials science research and had been dealing with a particle beam synthesizer that produced materials with inconsistent molecular structures. Dr. Aurora Metalforge, the station's materials specialist, explained the problem while Eddie examined the synthesizer. The molecular inconsistencies appear random, but they render our synthesized materials unsuitable for research applications. Eddie looked at the synthesizer, which resembled a high-tech forge capable of manipulating matter at the atomic level. The machine operated with incredible precision, controlling particle beams that could create materials with properties impossible to achieve through conventional manufacturing. But Eddie noticed something the alien engineers had missed. The synthesizer was mounted on a platform that had a slight vibration from the station's environmental systems. The vibration was minimal, well within engineering tolerances, but it occurred during the precise moments when the particle beams were shaping molecular structures. Doc, this thing needs to be perfectly still when it's working, right? Yes. Molecular synthesis requires absolute precision during particle beam shaping. Eddie pointed to the barely perceptible vibration in the mounting platform. Your platform's got a little shake to it. Not much, but it happens right when the machine's doing its delicate work. The solution required isolating the synthesizer from the station's environmental vibrations using shock absorbers that Eddie improvised from standard maintenance supplies. The molecular consistency problems disappeared immediately. Mr. Santos, Dr. Metalforge said, studying her first batch of perfect synthesized materials in 2 months, our diagnostic equipment detected no problematic vibration levels. Sometimes perfect isn't good enough. This machine needs better than perfect. It needs absolutely still. By the end of his 3rd week touring research stations, Eddie had resolved equipment malfunctions through simple fixes that alien engineers had consistently overlooked, adjusting humidity levels for sensitive electronics, improving air circulation for heat-generating equipment, isolating precision instruments from minor vibrations, and cleaning components that self-diagnostic systems had reported as functioning properly. Each fix addressed basic environmental factors that alien diagnostic technology monitored, but didn't optimize for the specific needs of the equipment. Eddie's reputation for solving impossible equipment problems had reached the highest levels of the Galactic Research Council by the time he returned to Station Delta 7. Dr. Crystalline met him at the docking bay with news that surprised him. Mr. Santos, the Galactic Research Council has requested that you address their annual symposium next week. They wish to understand how human diagnostic methodology differs from established scientific approaches. Doc, I don't know anything about scientific methodology. I just fix things. That appears to be precisely what they wish to understand. A Galactic Research Symposium was held on the Council's Central Station, a massive facility that served as the hub for scientific research. Throughout the sector, Eddie found himself standing before an audience of over 300 scientists representing 27 different species, all of whom regarded him with expressions of professional curiosity. Esteemed colleagues, began Council Administrator Deep Current, we have invited Mr. Eddie Santos to share his diagnostic methodology, which has achieved unprecedented success in resolving equipment malfunctions that have challenged our best engineers. Eddie looked out at the assembled scientists, feeling like he was supposed to deliver insights he wasn't sure he possessed. I'm not sure I have a methodology, exactly. I just try to notice what's actually happening instead of what's supposed to be happening. Dr. Vera Crystalline, who had accompanied Eddie to the symposium, provided context for the audience. Mr. Santos has resolved 43 equipment malfunctions across 17 research stations in the past month. His success rate is 100%. A murmur of scientific interest rippled through the audience. Mr. Santos called Dr. Lyric's Starweaver from the audience. Can you explain how you identify problems that our diagnostic equipment cannot detect? Eddie thought about how to explain his approach to an audience of galactic scientists. I think maybe your diagnostic equipment is really good at measuring what it's designed to measure, but sometimes the problem isn't in the thing you're measuring. It's in something basic that affects the thing you're measuring. Can you provide an example? Like the plant growth accelerator. Your environmental controls were perfect for measuring atmospheric composition, but they weren't providing the air movement that plants need to grow properly. The problem wasn't in your atmospheric systems. It was in understanding what plants actually need. Dr. Corvin Steelclaw, who Eddie recognized from previous consultations, stepped forward. Mr. Santos, are you suggesting that our scientific approach is fundamentally flawed? Not flawed, just ... Maybe too complicated? Like, you have amazing technology that can measure things I can't even understand, but sometimes you miss simple problems because you're looking for complex solutions. The audience fell silent as scientists throughout the auditorium considered the implications of what Eddie was saying. Mr. Santos, said Council Member Aurora Deepthought, whose neural interface flickered with rapid data processing. Our diagnostic protocols are based on comprehensive analysis of all relevant parameters for each system. Right, but maybe all. Relevant parameters doesn't include everything that actually affects how the system works. Like, nobody thought air movement was relevant to plant growth because your atmospheric controls were working perfectly. Eddie looked around the auditorium, seeing expressions that he was learning to recognize as the alien equivalent of scientific paradigm shift. The thing is, most problems are simple. Equipment breaks down for basic reasons. Something gets loose, something gets dirty, something gets too hot, something doesn't have enough power. Your diagnostic systems look for complicated problems because they're designed by smart people who think about complicated solutions. But simple problems can have complex symptoms, added Dr. Crystalline. The quantum resonance calibrator displayed quantum coherence failures, but the actual problem was a loose bracket affecting power supply consistency. Dr. Nexus Brightflame, whom Eddie had worked with on several equipment repairs, addressed the audience. Mr. Santos consistently identifies root causes that our diagnostic protocols categorize as secondary or irrelevant factors. Maybe because I don't know enough about your technology to know it's supposed to be irrelevant, Eddie said. When everything looks complicated to me, I have to focus on the simple stuff. The symposium continued for 3 hours, with Eddie answering questions about diagnostic philosophy, practical maintenance principles, and the value of approaching technical problems with fresh perspectives. By the end, he had unintentionally delivered what the council later described as a revolutionary presentation on the limitations of over-sophisticated diagnostic methodology. 6 months after Eddie's symposium presentation, the Galactic Research Council had implemented what they officially termed Santos Diagnostic Protocol, a systematic approach to technical troubleshooting that prioritized simple explanations over complex analysis. Eddie returned to his regular duties on Station Delta 7. But his quiet life as a maintenance worker had been permanently changed. Research stations throughout the sector now consulted him regularly, and his diagnostic approach had been incorporated into engineering training programs for multiple alien species. Eddie, Dr. Crystalline said as he finished cleaning the main laboratory, I have received communication from the Intergalactic Engineering Institute. They wish to offer you a position as Senior Diagnostic Consultant for their multi-sector equipment maintenance program. Eddie paused in his floor, mopping to consider what Dr. Crystalline was telling him. Doc, that sounds like a fancy title for doing the same thing I've been doing. The position would involve traveling to research facilities throughout multiple galactic sectors, training engineers in Santos Diagnostic Protocol, and consulting on equipment problems that traditional methodology cannot resolve. And I'd still be fixing things? You would be teaching others how to fix things using your methodology. Eddie looked around the laboratory where he'd spent 3 years learning that alien technology wasn't fundamentally different from human technology. It just looked more complicated. The same basic principles applied. Something loose, something dirty, something hot, something without power. Doc, would I still be based here on Delta 7? The position would allow you to maintain your residence here while traveling to consultation assignments throughout the sector. Eddie considered the offer. He'd never planned on becoming a galactic consultant, but he'd learned that his simple approach to problem solving could help alien scientists overcome the limitations of overthinking technical problems. Will I still have time to keep the station clean? I mean, somebody's got to maintain this place. Dr. Crystalline's crystalline features flickered with what Eddie had learned indicated affectionate amusement. Eddie, I believe the station can manage routine cleaning duties while you pursue your consulting responsibilities. All right, Doc, but I want to keep my maintenance certification current. Once you stop fixing things regularly, you lose the feel for what's actually broken versus what's just acting up. 3 months later, Eddie stood in the main auditorium of the Galactic Engineering Institute, addressing an audience of senior engineers from 47 different species. His presentation topic, Advanced Diagnostic Theory, Why Simple Solutions Solve Complex Problems. The most sophisticated diagnostic equipment in the galaxy can tell you exactly what's happening inside any machine, Eddie told the assembled engineers. But it can't tell you why it's happening, and it can't tell you what simple thing might be causing complicated symptoms. He clicked to his first slide, which showed a simple maintenance checklist. Is it plugged in? Is it clean? Is anything loose? Is it getting appropriate power? Is temperature affecting performance? Is the environment what the equipment actually needs? Every diagnostic investigation should start with these basic questions, no matter how advanced the technology. Most of the time, the problem is something simple that got overlooked because you were looking for something complicated. Dr. Vera Crystalline, who had accompanied Eddie to the Institute, watched from the audience as engineers from dozens of species took notes on diagnostic principles that human maintenance workers had been using for generations. After his presentation, Eddie was approached by Dr. Aurora Synthesis, the Institute's Director of Advanced Engineering. Mr. Santos, your diagnostic methodology has revolutionized equipment maintenance throughout 17 galactic sectors. Repair success rates have increased by an average of 340%, and resolution times have decreased by 67%. Glad it's been helpful, Doc. We have received requests from engineering organizations throughout the galaxy to expand scientist diagnostic protocol training. Would you be willing to develop a comprehensive educational program? Eddie looked around. The Institute's advanced facilities, with the most sophisticated engineering minds in the galaxy, were learning that sometimes the best diagnostic tool was paying attention to simple things. Doc, I'd be happy to help. But the most important thing to remember is that this isn't really about advanced methodology. It's about not overthinking problems. 2 years after Eddie's first equipment repair on Station Delta 7, his diagnostic approach had been adopted by engineering organizations throughout the galaxy. The Santos method was now taught in technical schools, incorporated into diagnostic software, and credited with resolving thousands of equipment problems that had previously been considered unsolvable. Eddie maintained his residence on Station Delta 7, but traveled regularly to consultation assignments, teaching engineers that the most effective diagnostic tool was often the simplest approach to problem solving. Mr. Santos, Dr. Crystalline said during one of his regular check-ins, you have received an invitation that I believe you will find particularly interesting. What kind of invitation, Doc? The Universal Council of Engineering Sciences wishes to award you their highest honor for contributions to diagnostic methodology. The ceremony will be held on the capital world of the Galactic Federation. Eddie looked up from the equipment maintenance report he was reviewing, trying to process what Dr. Crystalline had told him. Doc, I just fix things. I'm not sure that qualifies for galactic awards. Eddie, your diagnostic approach has transformed equipment maintenance throughout the known galaxy. Engineering failure rates have decreased by unprecedented margins, and repair costs have been reduced by trillions. Galactic credits. Because people stopped looking for complicated solutions to simple problems. Precisely. Which represents one of the most significant advances in practical engineering in galactic history. The award ceremony was held in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Federation capital, with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy attending. Eddie found himself standing before an audience that included the leaders of interstellar governments, the directors of galactic engineering organizations, and the most distinguished scientists from hundreds of worlds. Citizens of the galaxy, announced Federation President Nexus Starbright, we gather to honor Eddie Santos, whose revolutionary diagnostic methodology has advanced the practical sciences throughout our civilizations. Eddie looked out at the assembled dignitaries, still not entirely comfortable with the attention his simple approach to fixing things had generated. The Santos diagnostic protocol has resolved equipment failures that challenged our most advanced engineers, reduced maintenance costs across every sector of galactic civilization, and demonstrated that the most effective solutions are often the most straightforward approaches to problem solving. When called to the podium to accept the Universal Engineering Excellence Award, Eddie addressed the Galactic Assembly with the same practical wisdom he'd been sharing for the past 2 years. I think the most important thing I've learned is that complicated problems don't always need complicated solutions. Most of the time, equipment breaks for simple reasons, and if you start with simple explanations, you can fix problems faster and more effectively than if you start with complex analysis. He paused, looking around the Grand Assembly Hall, filled with the galaxy's most distinguished engineers and scientists. The other thing I've learned is that every species has valuable knowledge about how to solve problems. Human maintenance experience, Andromedian analytical precision, vegan systematic thinking, Centauri creative adaptation. When you combine different approaches to problem solving, you get better results than any single species could achieve alone. The assembly erupted in applause from hundreds of different species, each expressing approval in their unique cultural manner. After the ceremony, Eddie was approached by representatives from engineering organizations throughout the galaxy, each requesting consultation on diagnostic challenges that traditional methodology had failed to resolve. Mr. Santos, said Dr. Arcturus Deep Current, now serving as Director of Galactic Engineering Standards, we have established the Santos Institute for Practical Diagnostic Sciences. Would you be willing to serve as its founding director? Eddie considered the offer, thinking about the implications of institutionalizing his simple approach to fixing things. Doc, I'm honored, but I think the most important thing is to keep it simple. If you make it too official, people might start overthinking it again. What would you recommend? Keep teaching people to start with basic questions before they move on to advanced analysis. Most problems are simple, and simple problems need simple solutions. 5 years after Eddie Santos first tightened a loose bracket and solved the impossible quantum resonance calibrator problem, his diagnostic methodology had become standard practice throughout galactic civilization. Engineering schools taught Santos Protocol as fundamental curriculum. Maintenance workers across hundreds of species used simplified diagnostic checklists, and equipment failure rates had decreased to historically low levels. Eddie continued his consultation work while maintaining his home base on Research Station Delta 7, where his friends and colleagues had watched him transform from a maintenance worker into the galaxy's most respected diagnostic consultant. Eddie, Dr. Crystalline said as he finished his routine maintenance rounds. "I have received a communication that I believe represents the ultimate recognition of your contributions to galactic engineering." "What's that, Doc?" "The Cosmic Council of Advanced Civilizations, representing species that have achieved technological transcendence, has requested consultation on diagnostic challenges that have puzzled their most advanced engineers for centuries." Eddie paused in his equipment, cleaning to consider what Dr. Crystalline was telling him. The Cosmic Council represented civilizations so advanced that they rarely communicated with younger species. "Doc, what kind of diagnostic challenges are we talking about?" "According to their communication, they have achieved technological transcendence, but have discovered that their most advanced systems occasionally malfunction in ways that their perfect diagnostic capabilities cannot explain or resolve." Eddie sat down in his maintenance chair, thinking about the implications of what Dr. Crystalline was describing. So they've got perfect technology that sometimes breaks, and their perfect diagnostic systems can't figure out why. Precisely. They have requested consultation from the originator of Santos Diagnostic Protocol, believing that your methodology might identify solutions that transcendent analysis has missed. Eddie looked around the laboratory where his journey from janitor to galactic consultant had begun, thinking about loose brackets, dirty filters, and simple solutions to complicated problems. "Doc, it sounds like they might be having the same problem everyone else has, looking for complex solutions to simple problems." "That is what we suspect as well." The meeting with the Cosmic Council took place in a region of space where reality itself seemed more flexible, where Eddie's ship was guided by consciousness entities that existed simultaneously as matter and energy, and where the boundary between technology and pure thought had long since disappeared. Human Eddie Santos communicated an entity that appeared to be both machine and living consciousness. "I am Transcendent Synthesis Perfect Understanding, representing the Cosmic Council of Advanced Civilizations. We have observed your diagnostic methodology and believe it may resolve challenges that have puzzled transcendent consciousness for millennia." Eddie found himself in what could barely be described as a physical space, region where transcendent beings had created technology that operated according to principles beyond conventional physics. "Transcendent Synthesis, I'm honored by your invitation, but I should mention that I don't understand transcendent technology. I just know how to fix basic problems." Human Eddie, that limitation may be precisely why your diagnostic approach succeeds where transcendent analysis fails. We have achieved perfect understanding of our technology, but perfection appears to have created blind spots in our problem-solving capabilities. The entity showed Eddie transcendent systems that defied every principle of engineering. He understood machines that existed as pure consciousness, technology that operated through thought alone, and diagnostic systems that could analyze reality itself with perfect accuracy. But even transcendent technology occasionally malfunctioned, and when it did, the malfunctions were impossible for transcendent consciousness to understand or resolve. Human Eddie, observe our consciousness matter synthesis array. It should maintain perfect harmony between thought and physical reality, but occasionally produces dissonance that our diagnostic consciousness cannot explain. Eddie looked at the array, which appeared to be a crystalline structure that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, pulsing with patterns of light that seemed to represent pure thought becoming physical reality. But Eddie noticed something that transcendent consciousness had missed. The array's patterns weren't quite synchronized with the subtle rhythms of the space around it, like equipment that was perfectly calibrated, but not quite in tune with its environment. Transcendent synthesis. This thing operates by harmonizing with the natural rhythms of reality, right? Correct. The consciousness matter synthesis requires perfect resonance with the fundamental frequencies of existence itself. But what if those fundamental frequencies change slightly over time? Like What if reality itself has natural variation that your array isn't accounting for? The transcendent entity processed this suggestion for several moments, an eternity in transcendent timescales. Human Eddie, you propose that our synthesis array maintains perfect resonance with theoretical fundamental frequencies, but reality's actual frequencies vary in ways that our perfect measurements do not detect? Right, like tuning a guitar too. Perfect pitch in a room with no humidity, then playing it outside with a temperature and humidity are different. What followed was the most extraordinary diagnostic challenge of Eddie's career. Working with transcendent consciousness entities, he began teaching them to consider that even perfect systems might need to account for imperfect environments, and that even transcendent technology might benefit from simple adjustments for natural variation. The solution required calibrating the consciousness matter synthesis array not to perfect theoretical frequencies, but to the actual, slightly variable frequencies of reality itself, accounting for cosmic background fluctuations, dimensional drift, and the natural breathing of space-time that transcendent measurements had been too perfect to detect. Human Eddie, transcendent synthesis communicated after the array achieved stable operation for the first time in millennia. Your diagnostic methodology has revealed a fundamental limitation in transcendent consciousness perfect analysis. Can miss imperfect realities that require adaptive solutions. Transcendent synthesis, maybe the most perfect system, is one that can adjust to imperfection instead of trying to eliminate it. Over the following months, Eddie worked with the Cosmic Council to apply Santos' diagnostic protocol to transcendent technology throughout their realm of existence, teaching consciousness entities that had achieved ultimate sophistication to consider simple explanations for complex problems. Each successful repair followed the same pattern: transcendent systems that were perfectly designed for perfect conditions, but needed simple adjustments to account for the natural imperfections and variations that existed in actual reality. 2 years after his consultation with the Cosmic Council, Eddie Santos had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A Thage maintenance worker whose simple diagnostic approach had transformed technical problem-solving from the most basic civilizations to the most transcendently advanced consciousness entities in known existence. Eddie returned to Research Station Delta 7 to find that his home had become an unofficial pilgrimage site for engineers, scientists, and consciousness entities from throughout the galaxy who wanted to learn the principles of practical problem-solving. Eddie, Dr. Crystalline said as he completed his routine maintenance rounds, I have extraordinary news. The Universal Assembly of all consciousness, representing every form of intelligent life in known reality, has voted to establish the Santos principle as the first law of practical problem-solving. Eddie looked up from the air filter he was cleaning, trying to process what Dr. Crystalline was telling him. Doc, what's the Santos principle? Start with simple explanations before considering complex solutions. Most problems are simple, and simple problems need simple solutions. Eddie smiled, thinking about the journey that had taken him from a maintenance worker cleaning research stations to a consultant, teaching transcendent consciousness entities how to account for imperfection. Doc, that's not really a principle. That's just common sense. Eddie, common sense appears to be the rarest quality in the universe. Advanced civilizations consistently overthink problems, looking for sophisticated solutions when simple approaches would be more effective. So what does this first law thing mean? It means that every engineering school, every diagnostic system, every problem-solving methodology throughout known reality will begin with Santos principle assessment before proceeding to advanced analysis. Eddie finished cleaning the air filter and installed it in the laboratory's atmospheric system, ensuring optimal air circulation for the alien scientists who still conducted research on Station Delta 7. Doc, I'm honored, but I want to make sure people remember the most important part, which is, most problems are simple. Complex analysis is useful, but it shouldn't be the first thing you try. Start simple. Can only get complicated if simple doesn't work. Dr. Crystalline's crystalline features flickered with the affectionate amusement that Eddie had learned to recognize over their years of friendship. Eddie, would you be willing to address the Universal Assembly? They wished to hear the Sanctus Principle, explained by its originator. Eddie looked around the laboratory where his extraordinary journey had begun with a loose bracket and a willingness to listen to what equipment was actually doing instead of what it was supposed to do. Sure, Doc, but I want to keep it simple. The Universal Assembly of all consciousness gathered in a space that transcended physical reality, bringing together representatives from every form of intelligent life throughout known existence, biological consciousness, digital consciousness, integrated consciousness, transcendent consciousness, and forms of awareness that defied categorization. Eddie Santos, maintenance worker from Research Station Delta 7, stood before this assembly of ultimate intelligence and spoke with the same practical wisdom he'd been sharing for the past 7 years. The most important thing I've learned is that complicated problems usually have simple causes. When something's broken, start by checking the basics. Is it connected properly? Is it clean? Is it getting what it needs? Is the environment affecting it in ways you didn't expect? He looked around the assembly of transcendent beings, each representing consciousness evolution that spanned millions of years. The second thing I've learned is that perfect analysis isn't always better than practical observation. Sometimes you need to pay attention to what's actually happening instead of what should be happening according to your measurements. The assembly listened with attention that transcended species, consciousness types, and evolutionary stages. But the most important thing is this: every form of consciousness has valuable knowledge about problem solving. Human practical experience, alien analytical precision, transcendent perfect understanding. When different approaches work together, you get better solutions than any single method could achieve alone. Eddie paused, thinking about his journey. From a janitor who noticed unusual sounds to a consultant teaching the universe's most advanced consciousness entities. Problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved. Start simple, stay curious, and remember that the best solution is usually the one that works, not the one that sounds most impressive. The Universal Assembly responded with approval expressed in forms of communication that spanned every mode of consciousness in known existence. A symphony of agreement from biological minds, digital consciousness, integrated entities, transcendent beings, and forms of awareness that existed beyond current understanding. After the assembly, Eddie was approached by entities representing consciousness evolution throughout the cosmos. Human Eddie Santos communicated a collective consciousness that spoke for integrated biological digital civilizations throughout multiple galaxies. Your diagnostic methodology has transformed problem-solving throughout universal civilization. How do you wish to be remembered? Eddie looked around the space where ultimate intelligence from throughout reality had gathered to learn about simple solutions to complex problems. I want to be remembered as someone who reminded everyone that most problems are fixable if you start with the basics and don't overthink it, and that the best way to solve hard problems is to work together, because everybody knows something useful about how to fix things. As consciousness entities throughout the universe began implementing Santos Principle as the foundation of all problem-solving methodology, Eddie Santos returned to Research Station Delta 7 to resume his work as a maintenance technician. Because even in a universe where transcendent consciousness had learned to apply simple solutions to complex problems, somebody still needed to clean the air filters, check the connections, and make sure everything was running the way it should. Some jobs never change, and Eddie Santos was perfectly happy with that.